So, in my last video, I demoed a missile factory or a rocket factory. So where it used some of these blocks, these placer blocks, to build onto an existing machine to add blocks to it and build up a rocket piece by piece. But it did involve a whole load of manual sort of button presses on these things and setting values to make it move along this rail, etc. So, and I said at the end of that video that it would be possible to put a whole load of circuitry together to run that automatically. However, that actually sounds really long and dull. So instead of that, what I've created is this new block here, which is the procedure block. Now the idea of this thing is that it will run along happily and just output a series of values out to its different connectors. And you see it's telling you which one's which as well, because I realised it's very irritating not knowing which one was which. So if I go into it, you can see that you can type in things like true and the number 7, and it will output them to those ports. Equally, you can add more steps, so it'll do this one, then this one, then this one, and you can say how long you want it to stay on a particular step for. And you can also set whether you want it after that time has elapsed to automatically move on to the next one, or to just become eligible to move on to the next one, and it needs to receive a signal into its input to actually move on. The difference, incidentally, between this signal to enter and signal to exit is, let's say I said it's free to exit, but it can't enter this next step until it receives a signal. That would mean that it would exit this one and start displaying nothing. And then once the signal was entered, it would start displaying, let's say, the number 7. So that's the difference between the two. The signal to exit basically keeps it on this step. The signal to enter means it can display literally nothing for a little while. But we don't actually need that one because I have created one earlier, because actually, if I'm honest, it's quite fiddly to get it to work. So if I go in here, you can see this is actually the procedure that's running the rocket factory. So if I go out of this, you can see that the south port is connecting off to this this antenna. The antenna I've already paired to that one up there, so that south port is basically controlling whether that attractor block is currently attracting. You've got the top port here, which goes off here to the rail, so whatever's coming out of that top port is going to control the position that the trolley's on. And finally, everything else is going to come out of the east port. Now, when I say everything else, that sounds like it's not going to work, because obviously there's a whole bunch of other stuff that needs to be done, like these places need to be told to place, etc. And there just aren't enough ports to give each one its own dedicated one. So instead of that, this outputs the letter that correlates to the step that it needs to do. And you can see it comes out here to these comparator blocks, and it's basically whatever comes out of there is compared to the letter of the step, which is coming out of here. If it's equal either side, then you get a true coming out, otherwise you get a false coming out. Incidentally, these comparators have got a few other options. If I put one over here, you can see it's got greater than, this is sort of less than, and the equality. So, for example, if you put in here the number 7, I don't know why I'm liking the number 7 so much today, and you put in here the number 6, and I'm going to put that on the high side, that on the low side, and then shout if you can see a screen. There it is. Okay, and fall down a hole intentionally. And then finally I put this to the output side of things. That should be outputting true, because 7 is indeed less than 6. On the other hand, if I swap those round, ends up false because 7 is not less than 6. Equally, I could set it to equality mode. Again, that's false. But if I put a 7 in, it works fine. Now, this thing, when it's on equality mode, will work very happily with strings. So, by which I mean words, for those of you who are not developers. So, if I give it the word hello, hello is equal to hello. Hello with an extra row is not equal to hello. So that's actually the way that these things are currently working. They're comparing the word A, or the letter A, to another letter A that's been coming out of here. And if I go back in here, you can see a number of steps. So, you know, it moves from position, well, it's on position 1, waits there for a while, the tractor's currently on. This is to enable it to reset properly. Then once it's finished waiting, it has step A, so that means it puts in the bit of stone. Still in position 1 though. Still in position 1, it then does step B. Step B is adding the rocket to the end and the anti-grav, etc, 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 until it gets to here, where it's in position 4, which is the end of the track, and it just waits here until it receives an input. And that input is going to come up in the front here, which, as you can see, I can trigger off this button, or you can see it's coming down from the bridge of the ship, and when it's waiting on that step there, you can see this is the only time when this west output is also true. So that's coming out of here, and this is going down, as the sign suggests, to an indicator light to say on the bridge that it's ready to fire. If it receives that input, it continues on with the rest of the step, and what that basically is to move the trolley backwards. Step E, which is to send a signal to actually launch the rocket, and then a final, basically, wait phase. These are the little fiddly bits, which were slightly complicated to put in. Reason for that is because if you imagine the signal comes out of here, it waits in this block for a single tick, so 1/10 of a second. Then it comes out of there, waits again for 1/10 of a second, etc, etc, etc. So it can run immediately down the wires, but whenever it gets to a logic block like this, there's a short delay. So I had to put those sort of things in. But to demo this thing actually working, resets to that position. Then it should, if I give it a second, there's the rocket, there's the engine on the back, and you can see it's all ready to fire. And then it's waiting at that step for me to click this button again. Click the button, that's removed, and off it goes. And then again, it's waiting to reset, and it's ready. Cool, huh? So I'm now going to go have a look at it from up here. I'm going to be very careful not to put anything in its way, because that would not end well for anything. Probably relatively safe to stand up here. So if it goes, and then you can see again, stone, rocket, anti-grav, TNT, and then you can see the circuitry. Oh, and then the whole thing goes wrong and explodes. That actually happened to me a couple of times. So here is, random demo, the fact that that I've added the ability to have save games sort of within the game, so you're not got a single save. So I'm going to go back to this one here. I'll figure out properly what went wrong there, but so I've just reloaded that from an earlier version of the game where none of that disaster happened. So there's probably some kinks in this factory. I think one of the big things is that if you're maneuvering while it's doing its stuff, it tends to go very badly wrong. So let's just let it start building while we go down to the bridge, and when it finishes, that green light should go. That light should go green. There it is. I'm also going to change this to pulse mode so that it won't just keep on firing when I turn it on. Now you see these two chairs here. Interesting thing that I'm not really going to demo, but these two are bound together. So outputs from this chair equal outputs from that chair, which means that I don't have to sit here in the middle of all of this nonsense. I can sit out here in the relatively wire-free bridge, but as you can see, I'm currently manoeuvring to the left. I need to put bigger engines on this thing, to be honest with you. I'm currently manoeuvring to the left, and bindings to that chair is leading to it moving. Yeah, moving. So that should do. So as you can see, the indicator light is currently green, which means you're ready to fire. Click the button, and if all goes to yep, there's the missile out the front, and hitting the trees and destroying them. Cool. And in a second, the indicator light should go green again. So it's rebuilt a new missile up top, and we are once again ready to fire. So, there we go. One fully automated missile factory, as promised. It's not very pretty though.